want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And there's like a few people I'd like to introduce in the audience. I'd like to say a shout out to Captain Lawler from Station 69. Battalion Chief Rohaley, I hope I said that right, from Battalion 5 Malibu. We've got Lauren Wonder from Caltrans here. And I'm sure we'll soon have Susan Nisman from Supervisor Yaroslavsky's office. But I just want to say your presence demonstrates your support for this community and our shared goal of making Topanga more safer and more fire adapted, which is one of my favorite buzzwords these days. In our first lecture, we learned about the history of fire, how it behaves in our Mediterranean ecosystem, and things we can do to change fire behavior around our homes. And that was actually Catherine who presented that, was one of the presenters. She's here back again tonight. Our second lecture showed practical steps we can take to make our homes less vulnerable to embers and to wildfire. The third lecture, we learned how we can create a more fire-resistant landscape around our homes. And tonight, our fourth lecture is called 27 E's, which stands for Route 27 Evacuation and Safety Enhancement. This is a voluntary program funded through the California Fire Safe Council to help those who own property on Topanga Canyon Boulevard remove hazardous vegetation. This benefits us all by reducing the potential ignition source and creating more safety in a fire emergency for residents to evacuate and for responders to enter. So even if you don't own property on Topanga Canyon Boulevard, we hope the lecture will serve as an educational opportunity that demonstrates further steps we can take to become a more fire-adapted community. That's right, everyone together. The key thing to remember is that 27 E's is a voluntary program. We cannot and do not wish to make any private property owner do what he or she is unwilling to do. All we can do is present the facts as best we can. And to help us do that, we have assembled some great speakers tonight who will keep their presentations brief to allow time for Q&A at the end of the evening.
We're going to start a little different. We're not going to do the PowerPoint just yet. We're going to do a video first. So Ryan's going to take care of that. And the video is just to give you the idea, the whole of the work that is being done around for this Fire Safe Council is around making sure that everybody lives properly at the right time, or also is safe for everybody to live. So evacuation is a big deal for this Fire Safe Council, and this video kind of projects that.
What you're about to see is KTVU News coverage of an unprecedented disaster which began in the hills above the Caldecott Tunnel. The most destructive wildlands fire in U.S. history raged out of control all day and through the night, Sunday, October 20th, 1991, in the Oakland-Berkeley Hills.
The tape you're about to see is raw videotape shot by KTVU photographers and excerpts from our continuous live coverage that day. When the fire broke out before noon, KTVU reporter Rob Roth and cameraman Nick Soares were there and made a narrow escape on a passing fire engine.
You're going to work on this side. And you don't have time for anything but to get out. Incredible, John. Look at the roof. Come on! Cars are gonna start to blow up, John. We better get. Shit. Let's go, John. Let's go. These cars. No, she's great. I don't know. Jesus Christ. Let's find Get down, clean it. Yeah, I'm gonna take this for Drink him up with your coat. Use your coat.
It shows what the decision making that it happens when you have fire upon of you. So we have the Ready, Set, Go program, leave early. So we cannot recommend that hard long enough to do that. So it's just a quick reminder. So one of the things that we decided to do is how we're gonna mitigate that hazard. So all the vegetation catching on fire and all that. So working with the Fire State Council, we developed a plan to decide how we're gonna do a hazard mitigation for this area. So the first party was to define what hazard is. And the hazard is the physical conditions that can lead to a fire. Now, there's a lot of confusion with the word risk. Risk is something you can quantify, but a hazard is part of the quantification of the risk. So it's not the same thing. They being used, but they're not the same way, but they're not the same word. And the reason being it for hazard, we just determined that a tree is a hazard, but for risk, the risk given to a house not only has to do with the tree next to the house, but it has to do with the fire hydrant, how far the fire hydrant is from the house, construction materials of the house themselves, how long does it take to the fire engine to arrive to the house, and all that. So it's all those factors quantified that delineates risk. So they're one depends on the other one, but not necessarily the same. Now, for wildfire hazard, I'm going to define some of the hazards that you happen in this community, but more towards fire, because that's what we're doing with this grant. We have two things only: probability of fire, and the fire behavior is going to be there. When the probability is not there, no big deal. But when the fire is there, you're going to have fire behavior. And we cannot control the weather. We cannot control other parts, but we can control the fuels. We can control the fire behavior to a point. So these are the hazards that you find around, property. I love the top left. That's a chimney, and it happens to all of us. How many times you want to go and do some trimming and you forget, and all of a sudden get away from you. Or you have the hazards for trees that they look nice and healthy and they're fantastic, but there's something going on inside of them. Or you had a fire in the past, and you have this tree on the bottom left right here that actually was burned inside, and when the wind came over, and also just cleaning up the top of your roof. So that's one things that we have. So what is fire hazard? So and what we can define fire hazard for what we're trying to do with this project. The thing I consider is what kind of mechanisms of ignitions you're going to have. So we talk about convective heat, we talk about radiation, we talk about fire embers. So we're going to have all those areas. And when we start looking at what can we remove or what we should remove to reduce the fire hazard, how the fire is going to arrive is a big part of that. And then what it meets the requirements for fire propagation. Once the fire is there, like that little spot that the family saw as they were leaving, once the fire is there, how can you contain it, or how can you minimize the effects of that fire? And then after that, once the fire is in the immediacy of your home or in the immediacy of your highway, what is the effects going to have? That exposure, what is going to do not only to the house itself, but to you as you're walking around the area. So all these factors are considered as we going, and we kind of start scoring and classifying what we're looking at as we walk around. In this case was Highway 27. So in the wildland zones, the fire is usually uniform. When you have brush, when you have forest, you can kind of determine the fire behavior. That all changes as soon as the fire hits wildland on an interface. The fuels are so diverse. Now you're not only dealing with the vegetation that it was, the brush itself, or the forest that it came from, or it went to, but now you're dealing with non-native plants. Now you're dealing with very nice cattails. Now you're dealing with shrubs that you're planting around your house. Now you're dealing with the house itself. The house itself is part of the fuel. So once a house starts on fire, what happens? The neighbor's house has a danger to start on fire, and now it's a completely different fire behavior. We don't have fire behavior models for home ignition for that. So what we try to do, try to keep the fire away from the homes, try to keep the fire away from the highways. So that's what we try to do. So for this current classification, what is the type of material that's going to burn? Brush, grasses, the houses themselves, structures themselves, the vegetation density, how dense, how close one plant is to each other, and the continuity. So you have a lot of vegetation close to each other, and then continuously all the way into the house, all the way into the highway. So that's another one thing that we looked at. The pattern of occurrence, the fire occurrence. Right here hasn't burned in a long time, but because it hasn't burned in a long time doesn't mean that it's not going to burn. So I'm trying to do the presidential thing right here. Some part Italian, if I let my hands go, they go. So, and also the distance to the wildland areas. How far are the wildland areas, not only for having a fire come from the wildland area to the developed areas, but the other way around. A lot of the wildland fires start in the urban areas and move into the wildland. So we should think about both sides of it. And then, the significant, you saw in the video, they were talking about a mile away that the fire brands can get. And that's just in a flat area. When you have a high elevation mountains and low valleys, like you have right here from the top of Topanga, we can see 3 miles firebrand flight, no problem at all. So. And all the pertinent information that we can see, we look at the plants right there. So the plants that we keep looking at, we can look at plants that can impede the safe evacuation or the fire equipment access. Of course, dead plants, of course, falling hazards, anything this insect damage or disease. And I brought a bunch of handouts outside for you guys right there. There's especially for oak trees, and they're outside. Take a copy of them. They're very good information in what you can do in your landscape to make it a little safer. But also, there's a few more little bugs attacking our oaks, especially right now, high value to us. So now plants that can contribute to fire propagation, and that can be any plant. If it's not well maintained, and I'll show some examples, any plant can contribute to fire propagation. I've seen ice plant burn. And of course, it's not the part of the ice plant that is nice and turgent, but it's the part of the ice plant and all the dead material underneath it. That's what it burns. So, but I seen it contribute to that. Insect damage, flammable species, firebrand production is a big thing. Palm trees, favors trees for Susan Nisman. Just kidding. But it's a big problem for Arizona. It's a big problem for fire. And of course, non-native species. Non-native species is highly flammable, especially grasses. That's where the fire starts, and they're easily to start, especially in our summertime and into the fall. Takes very little to get them going. Noxious weeds. Another part of the scoring, we start looking at the road system, how wide it is, how long it is, and the connectivity. Where does it get you to? So when you start selecting which vegetation you want to apply your monies from your fire site council to, you start putting all these factors together. And as we move along, that's something that we looked at. So structure location, do you have a structure close by or not? And then the structures themselves, all the building materials and how the house was built and all that. And if you want to see more about how the house was built and how they should be built, see the Steve Quarles presentation on your website. So another part of the classification is the high hazard, medium hazard, and low hazard. And that has to do more with what it is in the vicinity, immediate vicinity of it. And the high use areas is something that we're looking at. And Highway 27 is a high use area. You have a lot of moving vehicles, a lot of parked vehicles, and you have quite a bit of structures throughout. Medium hazard is also something to look at into, but it's just not so much people and vehicles and areas that are away from you. The hazard is still heavy for the vegetation itself, but not for humans and structures. So right now we pretty much put in our eyes in protecting human assets and ourselves. So treatments, and the treatments, we have several goals for that. And it's thinning, mowing, pruning. But the whole idea, you never think with one of these projects you're going to stop the fire. The whole idea is, I was talking about fire behavior earlier. You want to change the fire behavior. And you want to change the fire behavior to something manageable. So the whole idea is to step down the aggressivity of the fire behavior into something that can be more manageable, and into a point in an area that we call defensible space. So if fire is going to come into your road, if fire is going to come into your house, it's an area that either firefighters, either the house itself, because the way it's built and the vegetation selection around it, can defend itself against a fire. So a key element of prioritizing is that fire behavior. What is desired fire behavior you're going to have? Never think that you have fire breaks are not really fire breaks. Fire breaks are bumps, speed bumps for the fire, and just give us a chance to do something with the fire, but it's not something to stop the fire. Sometimes occurs because the requirements for ignition stop some way somehow, but it's not magic because you have one of those things in there that's going to stop the fire. So the developing a fire hazard reduction maintenance program is very important. And one of the main goals that we like to have is to create a fire adapted community. So one of the things that we're going to get into that, this is just the first phase, but one of the ideas to get into the maintenance part of it. And one of the main things to do with for maintenance is to have everybody talk to everybody. And I mentioned right here federal, state, private ownerships, but it starts with neighbor to neighbor. It starts with the people that you share the road with. That's where it starts right there. So collaboration is a big part of this effort. So, and then, there's some stuff, the strategy you will have, since the biomass accumulates rather fast here in Topanga Canyon. The initial treatment you're going to determine you have a low biomass left behind or high biomass left behind. Then you're going to start looking, you have undesirable plants right there. We have some non-native trees that burn pretty heavy. We have some non-native species that burn pretty intense. So maybe those can the ones we can start looking at the maintenance as we move along with these projects, but also look at the desirable plant association. One of the beautiful things of having a project like this is when you remove that eucalyptus, then when you remove that palm tree, also there's a beautiful oak right there that nobody's seen in a while right there. Or do you give the opportunity for some native vegetation that is more adapted to fire to come up and take over? So it says in media beautification, when you take all that mess away and you kind of, we said in one of the meetings right here a while ago, liberate the oaks, give it that a big opportunity for that. So desirable plant association is something that we would like to see. Site productivity, so right here is very fertile grounds. Rain is just sufficient, and we put a little bit of water, and everything grows in Southern California. And I know if it grows somewhere in the world, you can grow it in Topanga Canyon. And I don't mean what you guys thinking about. So rate of accumulation, since it's growing so fast, it starts accumulating real fast, so maintenance is very important. And then the structure of it, you have stuff that is low, medium, high, so the fire is going to go from the ground to the canopies of the trees real fast. And if historic fire regime, do you have something that is severe and it has something that is complete stand replacement? A complete stand replacement when your whole hillside is gone, when your whole homes are gone. And then you have to plan for that. You have to plan how you're going to do your maintenance to avoid exactly that, especially around your homes. And remember, there's value to the vegetation that you have around you. There's not only the value that you have because you moved to this area because it's so beautiful to look at the mountains, but it's the ecological value, and it's the watershed protection value, it's the soil protection value. So it's not only protecting yourself from the fire that can happen in mountains, but protecting the mountains for the fire can start here in the urban area. So very important. And I mentioned the desired fire behavior, climate regime. We know it rains in the winter, doesn't rain for 8-9 months, and our vegetation goes to being well and alive in the springtime to being dry now to very low live fuel moisture for the plants. So the plants are pretty dry right now. And they're dormant, so the plants have adapted. They're fire-adapted plants, but they're very dry. So we just got to deal with that. And also, again, fire-adapted communities, the ultimate goal. And I'm just going to show you a few examples of what it is. So leaning trees is a big thing. Yeah. And sometimes they're all by themselves, sometimes right on the houses. That's one of the criteria that we use for some of the trees that were selected. Compromise structure. I love that picture in the middle. So the tree might be, looking great, but there's something going on. You can call one of our foresters. You guys have a local foresters at the Malibu Forestry Unit. And if you have any doubts that a tree that you might have a disease, or you might have a problem with structural integrity, or anything that you might think, that you can call LA County Fire Department Forestry Division, Malibu Forestry Unit, and they will come to your house for free to give you advice on that. So, Bill explained this one really well. So, and also one thing I like about Bill is the right plant for the right place. So sometimes we have some choices, highly flammable juniper right next to the house. Remember the house that it was all cement in the video? So, high intensity, that's what it did to the cement. So palm trees. And what it does, the palm trees are great, and you see in the house they look fantastic, but even the well-trimmed palm trees, right there, you see what the fire can do to it. And now your house that it was high fire rating, now it drops down quite a bit because you have a fire source right next to it. So plant selection. So you probably cannot see it, but right there on the back, right above the bougainvillea, you can see the roof of the house right there. And bougainvilleas are beautiful, and they look great when you're looking from afar, but once you got into inside of them, and that was happening. It gets away, and I'm guilty because I hate to prune my bougainvilleas because as soon as you put your hand on it, and your arms start getting shred, you know. So guess what? I don't have bougainvilleas in my house anymore. So this is something that happens, right? So it looks beautiful from the outside, nice and lush, but the inside has a lot of material in there. Something to consider. Once again, this is Steve Quirrell's picture. You can imagine the fire behavior. Look at their North Topanga Fire State Council website to see more on this. Our accumulation of pine needles or any other debris, dead material, dead and deceased plants, and or dying vegetation is a big thing that we were looking when we were doing the assessment. And when I say we kind of discussing that, but the great amount of the work was done by the fantastic citizens of the North Topanga Fire State Council. So this is one of the things that's inconsistent fire hazard. Anybody can tell me why I call it inconsistent? What's going on in there? Yeah, it's when you walk outside to go see that the brush is clear and the branches are hitting your face. Maybe it's not a good balance right there. So the whole idea is you can create this donut around your house, but the whole idea is to, from the house out, reduce the fire hazard in immediacy to your structure, not around your structure, and they have the immediacy covered with vegetation that can create heavy heat right there. So probably some more work on the trees and less on the hillside, or more balance in there. So this is an example of a powered line. This was in Covina a little while ago. It was during a windy day, and somehow the power lines hit this, and I took this out of the TV, so I don't know how clear it is, but you have a bunch of Italian cypresses burning right next to each other. And we love to put the Italian cypresses right next to each other, and then all the way from the street, all the way right next to our houses, especially underneath the eaves right there. So it's kind of like invitation for the fire to come to our house. And then the desired fire behavior. So you do modification, you do your 100, 200 feet around your house of clearance. And then on the top left, you can see right there that there's actually fire that went through that. But the plants are spaced so well that the fire did do that, did go through that, did burn, but it reduced the hazard. And then on the top right, you can see a fire that actually came to a house, but it went from heavy flames into less fuel, less fire. And on the bottom right is a parking lot right next to a place. This fire was in the San Clemente fire in 2005 in Palos Verdes Peninsula. But you can see how the vegetation is separate. Yes, the ivy did catch on fire, but the ivy didn't get the fire to the tree, therefore more damage. So that truck was fine. So you're gonna have fire, but it's a desired way to fire. Embers, one of our main problems, and you can see the point with the embers is that to you and I doesn't mean much, although I had one of them that came, I have my gear properly set, and it came inside, and once it gets inside of you, it starts burning your skin slowly. It's quite painful. But they're small, and we don't think much of it, but when you have thousands of them, they can do a lot of damage. So palm trees, contribution of fire embers to a fire. And the fuel ladder. So that's right next to a road. That's something that we're looking at. So you have your grasses to a little brush, to a tree, to a fence. Fence is usually connected to the house. So we're looking, evacuation route, that's what the whole idea, make Highway 27 a safe area to evacuate. Because as you saw on the video, once the fires start coming on both sides, it gets really hard. It gets really difficult to get oriented. A lot of the people that we lose on fires trying to leave is because they waited too long. And that road that is so familiar to you every single day doesn't look the same anymore. And you get lost, or you want to go up or you want to go down, like that family in the video. So decision making changed a lot. You have people screaming, and your mind screaming at you. What are you doing? So you can see the firefighter over there here on the bottom left. Pretty much you cannot go through that. There's some areas in Topanga that we can see that. So when the fire's here, just we have the ready, set, go. That's something that we would like you to express. We have a Smokey Bear signs around here that says fire danger. Fire, have your, bags packed, have your stuff ready when that's gonna happen. With the fire state council, we're gonna try to do the best we can to reduce the fire hazard, but like you saw with the cement house, the smart thing that guy did, even though he had a house that believed it would not burn, it did. It's better you're not there when that happens. So fire hazard reduction works. Thank you very much.